My parents had me when they were so unbelievably young. I mean, my mother was 22. She'd graduated from college, worked barely a couple of years at IBM, and then boom, there I was. My dad was 24. And I think that their style, while not like the Betty Draper form of neglect where my parents were off smoking cigarettes and telling me to sit in front of the television, it was totally different. They believed in the playpen. They believed in putting me on a bike and banging a gong and having me come back at dinner, that kind of thing. My parenting style is actually, I would say, I take a lot of cues from my parents' style. I'm more immersive. I'm down on the floor more with my son than they were, and I certainly must feel more guilt. But I don't have any problem saying this is not a democracy and because I said so, and you don't have, it's good enough for you to know that I have your best interest in mind, but the answer right now is no, and I have good reasons. I don't like negotiating, and my kid's kind of a lawyerly type. Even though he's 6, he has like unbelievable litigation skills, but I don't love negotiating with him. So the way that I became interested in this subject was actually kind of oblique and random and weird. It was 2006, and I had done this story for New York Magazine that led me directly to a book by Dan Gilbert called Stumbling on Happiness. And toward the end, there were like 2.5 pages. They were practically tacked on. They were not central at all to the book's main thesis. That happened to mention that kids did not improve parents' happiness one iota. That, in fact, there was a net gain of 0. When I read this, I was not a parent, and I was completely surprised. Thought it was interesting and wanted to write a magazine story about it right then and there. But I knew that there would be a huge credibility gap between me and whoever the readers were, because I wasn't a mom. So when I became a mom, I kept turning around this data point in my head. And I wrote a magazine story about this, interrogating this very strange, very robust finding in the social sciences. I wrote about this in 2010. And what I concluded is that it was both right and totally wrong. One of the most gratifying things about having written this book are the random emails I get and tweets out of nowhere and Facebook posts that say, oh my God, I thought this was only me. I had no idea that I sat plop right in the middle of the bell curve in terms of my experience. I couldn't, these are things I wasn't really discussing with my girlfriends or with my male friends or whatever it was. It's such a relief to know that I am not on my own with this stuff and that we are all going through this. If I were held at gunpoint and told to give people advice about what to do, here is what I think I have learned. I have learned that, number one, you might think that all the stuff that you're doing on behalf of your kid, all that driving around from, one after-school activity to the next is like what you have to do. And I'm sure that, we are all nervous about preparing our kids for the future. We all suffer from enormous economic anxiety. We all think about the shrinking economic pie. But you are not a bad parent if you do not book up your child's schedule 7 days a week. When I was in high school, I was told that I had to learn Japanese, that it was imperative that I learn Japanese, and that if I didn't learn Japanese, I would be handicapped in this world. And with all due respect to the Japanese, I'm fine. It's fine. We don't know what skills are going to be applicable. So don't worry. You haven't missed any boats if you aren't doing everything that your extremely anxious neighbors are doing. That's one thing I would say. Another thing I would definitely say, and this is what I do. It turns out there is a difference between our experiencing self and our remembering self. Our experiencing self is clearly very stressed out by parenting. Our remembering self, on the other hand, loves having parented and loves parenting. If we look back on our happiest moments, our most joyous times, there are things we've done with our kids. So, knowing this, what would be the logical thing to do? I think it would be to optimize our remembering selves. It would be to maximize that self's potential. So I take a ton more pictures now than I used to. And I write down all the funny things that my kid does because I can remember them at the end of the day. Even if I'm stressed out by certain childcare, activities and things, at the end of the day, I can climb into bed and I can relook at a video or I can reread something hilarious that my kid said, and it's delightful.